Today we're going to talk about how to make drums sound massive like they were recorded in a really expensive studio, but secretly they were just recorded in a small home studio. So the secret to a really big, larger than life drum sound lies in having the room tracks. But many home studios either don't have enough inputs in their interface to add two more room mics, or they just didn't record them at all because the room sounds so bad in general. So in today's video, I'm going to show you 5 different ways to fake a drum room sound so that your drums can sound competitive with a professional recording studio. Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Bobby Balo, and I'm the mixing and mastering engineer at Raytown Productions. This channel is dedicated to helping you make better sounding music without needing to spend money on expensive gear or unnecessary plugins. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining me today. Be sure to hit that subscribe button because I drop new videos every single week. It's going to help you level up the quality of your music. And as a special thank you for joining me here today, I have a gift for you. In the description, I have a link to a free guide that has all of my favorite free mixing and mastering plugins. These are plugins I use almost every single day when I'm mixing music. So if you need some inspiration or you just need some new reverbs or delays or samples or any of that stuff, I have links to all of that in that free guide. So if that sounds interesting to you, go and grab your copy. So the song we're working with today is actually Multitracks that were given out by Brian Hood. I have a link to download his free Multitracks in the description. And also, if you haven't heard of Brian Hood before, you should definitely check him out. He's a great guy and a brilliant educator. Okay, so what are some ways that we can fake a drum room mic? The first tip I have for you is to duplicate your overhead track. Hopefully this is stereo, but if it's mono, that's okay too. So you duplicate the overheads. So I'm just going to rename this to Fake Room 1. This is an exact copy of our overheads track. So step 1, we need to do some filtering of the frequencies out of this overhead track. And the reason being is that we can run into some phase problems with our kick and snare drum when you have duplicated tracks that you're kind of tweaking on a drum kit. Okay, if you accidentally cause phase shift in the wrong spot, you can take all of the power out of your drums. So let's start by rolling off some low energy. Let me just play this back. Okay, so we want to get rid of everything about just above 200 hertz and below. You can do that either with a shelf, like I'm doing here, or you can use you can just cut or do a high pass filter. Okay. Basically, you're trying to find the spot where the snare no longer has any more body to it, and that's just going to ensure that when we blend this in with our other microphones, that's not going to do any phase cancellation in this area. Okay, now, room mics tend to be dark, and the reason being is we usually compress the heck out of them to really bring out the space, and that's going to make the top end harsh. So let's roll off a bunch of high frequencies. Okay, right about here feels good to me. Again, we just want it to sound like you're listening to a drummer in the room next door. And at this point, let's not worry about anything else because the problematic frequencies will jump out to us once we start compressing this track, okay? So the next step is to find a cool, vibey compressor. A lot of people like an 1176 compressor for this. Waves has a great one. I'll put a link to it in the description. One that I'm liking more and more is actually this compressor by Harshness. It's called Tuco. This thing's really vibey. Love it for smashing room bus, okay? So I'm going to use this compressor, and we're literally just going to compress this as hard as we possibly can. So I have this set up as limiter fast attack just to make it kind of a grabby sound, and let's see what we can do. Cool, you can hear it's really starting to pump and swell now. So I tend to go with a faster release just to give it a little bit more movement, and it really is bringing out the width of the track. What's cool about Harshness Tuco is it has actually a distortion circuit built in. So this is like simulating like a tube distortion. It really helps to wake up a fake room bus. Cool. That sounds awesome to me. So now what we can do is just add another EQ, and I'm just using these stock EQs that are built into Cubase, but you're welcome to use whatever one that you like to use. Now we need to clean up some of this mid-range garbage that's happening. So let me play it, and we're going to find a spot where it just sounds really cloudy, and then we're going to cut from that spot. So like right here. Cool. And again, we want to make sure we're getting rid of everything about 200 hertz or below, because we don't want this information to phase cancel out with our original drum tracks, okay? So let's clean up some of this 200. Cool. And I'm just going to put a shelf here. Cool. Now you'll notice that those cymbals are kind of getting irritating, right? That's because we were compressing so much. Let's do a broad cut and make those a little bit more tame. Oh, like that is awful. Cool. And then we're just going to roll off the most bright stuff there. Cool. Okay, so I'm just going to fade up that track. I'm going to solo just the drums so we can hear how much space it adds to the sound. Without it. So it has a little bit of this mid-range cloudiness to it. I'm just going to go and scoop out a little bit more. Right there. That. Cool. Now let's turn it up a little bit more. Okay, let's see how it sounds like with and without it in. Still a little bit too loud. There you go. You can hear it just adds this totally different dimension to the drums. And this is still probably a little bit loud. So in the mix, I would actually pull it back a little bit more than this. But you know what? That'll work for right now. All right. The second tip I have for you for making a fake drum room sound is take your drum bus and send some of that volume to a reverb plugin that has just the early reflections enabled, okay? We don't want any reverb necessarily, or maybe just a tiny bit of it, but the early reflections are what we really are looking for. Pretty decent sounding reverb plugin by Waves called TrueVerb, that the reverb doesn't sound that great, but the early reflections are amazing, okay? So we just want to enable the early reflections. We don't want any of the direct signal. We just want that space, okay? We don't want the reverb necessarily, because that's just going to maybe cloudy up the mix a little bit. But the early reflections have this magic thing where it makes it feel like the drums are now in a bigger space, okay? So let's send some to it so you can hear what it does to the sound. Now, once we have that on there, let's compress this really, really aggressively. I'll use Waves 1176 for this. I like this bluey mode. Tend to do the attack really slow and then a fast release. Okay, and then we can just tweak this plugin just to give it a little bit more space. that sounds pretty massive to me, right? Now, again, we want to put an EQ and sculpt the sound a little bit. Ideally, we're going to try to get rid of some of that low, mid information and clean up some of the kick drum rumble. Again, that's just going to help with the punch when we blend it. Here we go. Roll off some of those high frequencies. All right, so let's fade this up into the song and see how much bigger it'll make the drum sound. Here we go. Without it. So pretty cool, right? It has a different feel than the other approach that we took, but it still gives the drums a bigger sense of space, which I really like. And in some cases, this is a lot more transparent than that other method. So if you just need a little bit more width, try this. And again, that plugin by Waves is TrueVerb. It's kind of a weird plugin, but the early reflections on it are awesome. Okay, my third trick for making a fake room sound is we're going to make an auxiliary track for the drums again. So I made one, I called it Fake Rooms. It's a group track. That's what they call it in Cubase, or a bus. Now, what we want to do is send some of the drums to that bus because we want to process them separately from these. So I'll take some of the drum shells. So this is going to have the snare, toms, all those, kick drum. We're going to send it to the fake rooms. And then we also want to make sure we take our overheads and send it to the fake rooms as well, okay? So if you do that, you get a sound that sounds something like this. Okay? So that's just all those individual tracks sent to this bus. Now, this is where it gets kind of crazy. The first plugin you want to use is actually a stereo delay. Okay, so I'm just going to use the generic one in Cubase. There's a cool one by Waves called H delay that I really like. To set up this trick, we're going to set the mix to 100% wet. And I find that the timing that we want is about 25 to 30 milliseconds on the left and maybe 35 to 40 milliseconds on the right. Has a good sense of width to it. Now we want to turn the feedback to 0 because we're literally using the delay to split the audio into a left and right channel that's slightly off, okay? So it's going to be a pseudo stereo sound to it. And then we want to make sure the panning is hard left and hard right, okay? If I play this back, it's going to sound kind of crazy. Let's listen. Kind of sounds like the drums are like really wide, right? Let's just listen to the shell so you can hear what it's actually doing. If you adjust this. So it kind of sounds like it's flamming a little bit. That is going to simulate like a pre-delay, which is going to simulate a sense of space in our mind. Now that we have that set up, the next step is to, again, EQ this so that we don't run into phase problems with the punch of the kick and snare. So let's roll off the low end again, find the spot where we have no more power in our snare and kick. So right about there, let's roll off some of the high frequency stuff. Good enough for me. Now, if you're working in rock, in metal, it might be a good idea to send a lot less kick volume to this fake room bus because the kick drums are typically really loud in rock and metal, and it sounds like it's flamming, right? Sounds weird, okay? So let's adjust that. Let's go back and we're gonna send less of the snare than the kick. We want this to be like at like minus 13, just a little bit feeding it. And we want our cymbals and our overheads to be really loud, okay? Now, if we listen to this, it should sound a lot better. Yeah. See how there's a lot less flamming now? That's very, very important. So if you hear that sound, that means that you have probably too much snare or too much kick drum feeding your fake room bus. So we scooped out those frequencies. Next step is we're going to compress the crap out of it. So again, I'm just going to throw Tuco on here. Again, this is by Sonymous. Set it to the fast attack limiter setting. Set auto makeup gain. Yeah. Fast attack. Add some distortion. Okay, now that we have the compression, it's going to help highlight where the problem areas are with the cymbals. So we're going to do some EQing to pull the harshness out now. Oh, no one wants that. There you go. Let's fade this in now. Let's take it out of the track and then fade it up to hear what it does to the overall drum sound. Here we go. So this sounds like a sweet spot, so let's take it in and out. Here we go. Just sounds so much bigger, right? Okay, my fourth tip for making fake drum room sounds is to literally drum replace our snare and kick and tom tracks with just room samples from a awesome sounding drum sample program, okay? Easiest way to do this, we're just gonna duplicate this again. I'm gonna take off all my sends and take off all my effects. So I'm using Steven Slate Trigger here to just sample replace this entire track with just the room sounds, okay? Some that I love, absolutely love, are in this Bogren digital signature drum pack that they released. They've captured some magic here. Just take a listen. So these samples just sound amazing. So we're just gonna find some that kind of fit the vibe of this song. So I really like that one, the Super Nice. So that is the wet track. So that is completely just room mics, right? The dry is the close mics. Blend is both. We want just the wet sound, okay? Now that we have this set up, let's listen to it as it's played back. Okay? That is just the room mic. So now we just send this to another group bus, okay? So fake room 2. Let's do the same thing for the kick drum. So let's duplicate the kick drum that we have. The track will bypass all of our effects. Okay, we're gonna load up another room by Bogren Digital. It's a ball slap. That sounds pretty awesome. Let's use that. Cool. Okay, let's listen to it back. We're going to set the mix to 100% because we just want the wet drum room sound. So let's send this now to that bus that is our fake room bus, okay? All right, so if we listen to what that sounds like. Okay, right? It sounds like just rooms. Now, normally I would also do the same thing for toms. There's not really any toms in this song, in this spot, so we'll just leave it as is. Now, in this bus, we're going to process it the same way we did before, We don't need to necessarily roll off the low end or the top end as much because these are totally different samples. They're not going to be related in phase too substantially to the initial tracks, although you want to listen for the loss of punch when you recombine these. And if it sounds weird, invert the phase or the polarity of this group bus and see if it brings the punch back. Okay, but we still want to add a compressor. So I'm going to go grab my tried and true Tuco compressor here. Set it to really aggressive settings. Awesome. So there's a lot of boom to this, so we will quickly clean that up. And I do like to always roll off the top end. Let's clean up a little bit of the mud. Like this, that's not helping anything. It just sounds annoying, right? Cool. All right, let's fade this in with the rest of the drums and see how much bigger it sounds. Okay, there's a lot of this like high-end sizzle that I'm not really liking. So let's take an EQ and cut some of that out just to help it blend a little bit better with the track that's there. It's this stuff. Awesome. Okay, without it. With it. It's amazing how much that room just makes the drum sound bigger, right? So that's a great trick. This is probably going to be the most transparent sounding trick out of all of them that I have for you. So that's something I would recommend trying if you have the drum samples. If you don't, then you can always use one of these other tricks. Finally, the last trick I have, which, full disclosure, I haven't tried it yet, but I've done stuff similar to this for some experimental projects I've worked on. And that is, take the dry drum sounds from your session, play them back through your speakers or your monitors or a PA system or something, and literally take two microphones and mic up the drums as they're played back into a room. It sounds insane, sounds crazy, but sometimes you can create magic with this. And experiment with different microphone choices. You can use a pair of 57s. You can use a pair of ribbon microphones, which I tend to love for capturing a drum room sound. And if you're in a really small house or an apartment or something, try putting those microphones in the hallway or in a different room and play the music as loudly as you can within reason, right? And try to record the sound of it from far away. You'd be surprised at how much space you can add using this trick. And as long as you process those rooms the same way I showed in this video, where you add a compressor to kind of increase the sense of space, and you're EQing out the flubby, crappy stuff that just takes up space in the mix, you're going to be able to make them usable, and it's going to sound massive. So there you have it, 5 different ways that you can fake a drum room sound to make your drums massive. Let me know in the comments which one of these 5 sounds the most amazing to you, or if you use any of these different strategies. And if I forgot something that you do to make drums sound super big, let me know in the comments below. I love having these discussions with all of you. Give these a shot on your next project where you didn't have any room mics, and let me know how it worked out for you. Don't forget to grab my favorite free mixing and mastering plugins guide. There's a link to that in the description. And with that, I want to thank you so much again for your time and attention, and I'll see you in another video.